Hi, welcome to the Better Minneapolis podcast. Today I'm here with Tom Olsen, who's running for at-large Park Board. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, like you said, my name is Tom Olsen.
How do you spell that?
Olsen, spelled the right way, was my convention.
I know, I heard that like six
joke.
times.
yeah.
So I definitely remember. It was good though. I remembered who you were. So.
Yeah. It's when I first ran, I definitely had a lot of interactions with voters who, kind of gave me gruff about it. So, I am currently an at-large commissioner for the Minneapolis Park Board system, serving for the last 4 years here. For my day job, because Park Board is only part-time, I work for the Minnesota House DFL down at the Capitol. So I work for the caucus there. I do communications with various state representatives. So very involved, very ingrained in our kind of political process here in the city and the state. I live currently in Fulton neighborhood, Ward 13. Just moved there, bought a house with my wife Paige. So I'm property taxpayer.
Okay.
Although renters are as well, right? Just kind of through a different process. So kind of first term, has been great. Really as a commissioner, trying to. What I've been saying to folks and saying on the doors is that 90% of the job is good stewardship of our park system. Mm-hmm. It's already so fantastic that we're really kind of just working on the edges to make it perfect. That's who I am. That's a bit about me, and happy to be here.
Okay. Well, let's start with just kind of educating people about what the park board does and also its structure. So there's the superintendent, and then there's someone who's president, and then you have how many members of the actual park board? So just give us the lay of the land of the basics.
Yeah, so the basics are that we are a board consisting of 9 elected members, 3 at-large seats, and 6 district seats. We basically, our job is to... The main priority of our job is to pass a budget for our city park system. We are unique in Minneapolis in that we have a separate governing body that governs our parks. I think we might be 1 or 2 independent park boards in North America. I think Vancouver is maybe independent as well. And so the 9 of us, we are charged with analyzing and looking at the budget. It's about $150 million total. That's including capital projects. If you include just kind of day-to-day budgets, closer around $120 million. And that actually, if you take our total budget, I think are maybe the 5th largest municipal budget in the state. We have a larger budget than Rochester. We have a larger budget than Duluth. So it's really, quite important, yet it kind of falls under the radar. We own something like 25-ish% of the total land in Minneapolis. We provide child care services. If there's a tree on a boulevard, that's all us. And another important thing that the park board does is we vote on and we negotiate and we decide who the superintendent is, and we vote on and approve the superintendent's contract. So the superintendent, while we are kind of at a macro level making decisions, with every once in a while specific planning decisions will come before us. We are, I would say, kind of more macro level, and then the superintendent and then the assistant superintendents, which I think there's 4 or 5 in different departments, are in charge of the kind of micro day-to-day nitty-gritty details. So while the superintendent ostensibly answers to us, certainly, if the board directs something one way or another, that is, the direction that, the superintendent is, not necessarily required to take, but if they want, their contract to be renewed, we'll kind of, follow that way. But, generally day-to-day operations, that's under the superintendent. So really it's budget and then superintendent. What is the demeanor? What are the priorities? What are the skill sets that we want in someone who's running our day-to-day operation?
So, for example, let's say I want to become a vendor at one of the lakes selling food, right? Does the superintendent decide who gets to be the vendor, or does the park board decide on that?
Well, so ultimately, it would be we are the ultimate decision maker, but the process of taking in applications, of making sure, doing the background checks, of making sure it's a viable business plan, that sort of stuff falls under. I don't know. Well, I know the employee is Shane Stencil. I don't know his exact title. But basically, we put out, RFP, we put out a process of saying, hey, this, at the Bidet Makaskat Pavilion, we put out kind of a wide net of this is available. We're going to be doing this with Owamni is departing, so we're going to be doing this with Above the Falls, with Waterworks. And
that'll be interesting, right? Because that's a popular. Well, they've made that a pretty popular restaurant, and I would think there would be a lot of interest in that.
Yeah, I mean, the location's fantastic. I don't think you have a better location in the city. They wanted to expand. Are incredibly popular destination setting, and while it is a fantastic location, and the park board, we offer certain advantages to businesses. At the end of the day, we do take a 12% revenue cut. That's, so Owamni's success has been benefiting the city of Minneapolis. It's how we are able to, pave our parkways. It's how we're able to, hire staff to, engage and hire youth. So, but kind of back to that process. So there's a whole staff process. And so the staff will eventually bring forward us, either options or, suggestions of, this is, after doing our analysis, we think this is going to be the best path forward. The park board can look into that. We can kind of say, we don't think this is the right fit. But typically we, as park board members, do kind of understand that staff have the ones that have been putting in all of the work hours into that and have a bit more of the background and understanding and expertise. And we, with decisions like vendors, will typically defer. It'd be kind of it would have to be kind of a this is really pretty obviously not going to work or something. Mm-hmm. But by the time it got to us, I think it would be. Pretty consent. So far we haven't had any.
Someone does the reviews of all the RFPs, makes a recommendation, and then the park board has to approve it. Essentially.
Yep, we approve it, that said, it's not a rubber stamp. We absolutely have the authority to change things around to say maybe in this first round of applications we didn't get what we were looking for.
Okay. So does the 12%, I'm curious about this because I didn't realize this, does that 12% cover the rent, or do they have to also pay rent?
I actually am not sure on that one. I think that covers kind of the full, this is the whole package. Yeah. Utilities and things like that might be separate. I'm not sure the exact details, and the specific percent changes per by vendor. A lot of times we will kind of start off kind of lower and allow folks to build that customer base, put more revenue towards other needs. Then that goes within, specifically within our enterprise fund that we're using to fund all sorts of good things.
So while we're on the topic of revenue, this gets a little complicated, right? Because the park board has a separate tax levy, right, than the city, or does it get?
So no, we get a portion of the city's overall tax levy. So what we do is we put in our request to the BET, Board of Estimate and Taxation, which is made up of the board members who are elected, which is another important election coming up. We have one park board seat on there, and we have a mayor seat, and I think it's 2 council seats. And so we put in our request, and so our request is then kind of this
As a
is the
dollar
portion.
figure.
Yeah.
So like
Well, a percent figure of the property tax. Hey, this is what we need. This is the percent increase we need, and then there's the calculation kind of what this would result in overall property tax increase. So, for instance, this year, I think we asked the BET for something around between 6 and 7, and that was covering a number of various things, wage increases for our employees, expansion to Graco and Upper Harbor Terminal, and that would overall result in something like around a 1% increase overall for the city. So it can be kind of complex, it can be kind of complicated, but overall we are at the behest of the overall BET members. Okay. And so that can be kind of quite complicated. We don't necessarily have a ton of autonomy in that regard. We also, the park board relies 80% of our budget is property taxes. I think it's something like only around 50% of the city's overall budget revenue comes from property taxes. They have a lot of things like fees. They have a lot of other intergovernmental expenses that come in that they're able to rely on, and they can kind of pull different levers. So while we're all being impacted by the downshift of commercial, property returns, the park board is kind of particularly reliant on that lever. And so something that this park board has been doing, we're really trying to focus on what are new ways to generate revenue so that 80% becomes more like 60, 50%.
And what are some of the ideas?
So a few of them, just simple, increasing more, parking metering, increasing parking fees. A lot of our parkways, a lot of our parking lots aren't necessarily metered, or they're metered kind of at a lower level. This is actually it's one of those things where it's like, parking can either be free, it can be, abundant, or it can be, there's some other third thing. And, this is a good way of, kind of reaching climate action targets, of trying to encourage folks to do another, get to the park in a different way. And it's also a good way of not necessarily taxing Minneapolis residents a ton. Certainly, Minneapolis residents use, our parking quite a bit, but actually the most significant portion comes from folks who live outside of our city, who are driving in from the suburbs to go to one of our wonderful regional parks. So that'll cover a portion of it. We're looking at things like, something I've been advocating for is kind of loosening and adjusting state law so that we as a park board can host more events like, traveling beer garden events. This is something that Philadelphia does. And then they generate something like around, between $200,000 and $300,000. So that's a few FTEs. So that's a few employees that we can do. We just, maybe our most significant thing, and which will probably start to pay a lot of dividends in the future, is we have a new, I'm totally blanking on the term, but an investment portfolio, basically, where we will be putting in kind of more and more funds. We will be, fundraising through, various philanthropy organizations, and then we will start to, off of that interest, create more. You're not
like buying cryptocurrency here, right?
We have, there's a board now that will be determining what exactly we do invest in. Maybe if we had this earlier, it would have been great to invest in crypto a while ago. I'm kind of the opinion that it's maybe a bit of a bubble, that it's maybe a bit of, we're kind of headed towards.
So there's a separate board from the park board that's deciding. They're basically kind of setting up their own trust, and they're investing it. And
so it's our trust, and it's the committee. Yeah, there is that board is appointed of commissioners, of park staff, and then of the philanthropic. That is the word.
And then there's also the nonprofit Park Board Foundation, right?
Yep. The Minneapolis Parks Foundation. That's who we're coordinating with in this effort. And
do they raise money for like specific projects?
Yeah, they do. So they raise money for discrete projects, and then they're also helping with this overall one. So North Commons could not have happened without the Minneapolis Parks Foundation. I forget the exact number, but it's in the tens of millions that they're contributing to that project, and that's a project that, through various delays, we suffered through, from inflation and increased costs related to that. And then that was also one where the last minute bonding bill 2 years ago, that didn't go through. We were supposed to get $12 million for North Commons, and it was kind of filibustered by state Republicans. And then, the DFL in the Senate was not able to get it through in that final minute there. And without the Parks Foundation, we would not have North Commons. Without the Parks Foundation, we wouldn't have Waterworks. And now this kind of new funding source, I do think that, we'll see exactly, I think there are various options where, we own, Meadowbrook in St. Louis Park. Maybe the park board sells that and we put the funds directly into, to start earning interest. And that can be, millions of dollars per year. It's like a Norway's sovereign wealth fund.
Right.
And so I think that's maybe the biggest thing we can do. There's some other things that I think are more controversial, things like billboards on our parkland that abut highways.
I'm against that.
Yeah, I'm against that too. But if we get into a desperate situation, it's, we could earn between $5 and $1 million a year. And if that's, that's something that, folks listening, voters might have to weigh in and say, yeah, I don't want to see my property taxes go up anymore. I'm okay with a few billboards. I'm not, but...
So you mentioned the state in there. So our park system is getting money from the state legislature.
Yeah.
Does that happen usually every year or?
Yeah. I mean, there are maybe a dozen different pots of money that we get from annually from the state government. The biggest one would be local government aid, LGA.
Yeah.
So that goes to Minneapolis, but we get a portion of that. We have.
How do we get more of that? I'm a proponent of seeing more of that.
Yeah, so that is something that when the DFL trifecta came in, that was a huge priority of theirs, and that was the first increase we had in several years. On our legislative agenda, we're constantly pushing more for that. And if you talk to Representative Aisha Gomez, who's the DFL tax chair in the House, she'll be able to kind of tell you how the LGA formula really does not benefit Minneapolis. It doesn't. So the formula is determined in a certain way around population and certain needs, and it's set up to benefit more rural communities. And so we could change the formula. That would be very difficult, but we can increase it by getting back to DFL trifecta. But then there are also things where we get more percent of that fund. So there's Metro Parks funding. So that's the whole metropolitan area, and that's kind of easier for us to find bipartisan support to get through, and we get a higher proportion of those funds. There's operations and maintenance funding, O&M funding. There's lottery in lieu funding, which is funding. Obviously, that comes in for natural areas from our lottery proceeds. We have specific funds. We just set up a new fund, thanks to Senator Scott Dibble. Thank you, Scott. That is a permanent fund for our parkways. It's only around $100,000 annually, but it's permanent and ongoing. And a lot of the things that you can do, at the legislature, you start off small and you kind of create the precedent, and then you can build in and build up there. I'm sure there are more streams I'm forgetting about, but
that's okay. I'm sure we've exhausted.
No, but it's
how the park board gets funded. But
it's I think the point that folks should take away is that the park board is heavily reliant on our intergovernmental partners. We need folks on the board. We need a board that is cognizant of that and is cognizant of the fact that we need to go to the state and we need to really make the case that, hey, Minneapolis is the largest city. It is the largest draw. The park system overall draws more visitors than I think anything else in the state. Mall of America, Boundary Waters, you name it. And even just the discrete regional park system of the chain of lakes, I think, is second to the Mall of America. So we are a state resource, and so we deserve to have these funds. And so we're being underfunded. Our trails system, it's not maintained perfectly. It's pretty bumpy in places. We're being underfunded by about $10 million by the state. And that reflects on the whole state. It's not just an urban-rural divide thing. It's not just a Minneapolis thing. And so I think that's a case that we can make to the state. Yeah.
Well, I hope we're successful because I love the parks. Maybe you could go into just what are your priorities for this election, and I'm also curious, have your priorities changed at all? So you ran 4 years ago. If you pull out an old brochure, does it look like your brochure now, or have things changed for you?
Yeah, so things have changed a little bit. So, I still kind of have the core values and priorities. I mentioned at the start, stewardship, I think, is still 90% of this job, and just good governance. And we have a good thing going here. We just won National Gold Medal Award, best park system in the nation. And so a lot of it's keeping that up. My personal background is around climate issues. I think climate change is the issue that we are going to be tackling as a constituency, as a people, as a park board. And so prioritizing different methods that we as a park board can take to, one, reduce our carbon footprint and also become more resilient. Already we're changing, the diversity set of trees that we're planting. We're kind of moving some up, southern catalpa, the one with the big leaves, that has a bit more of a biome that we expect to be in. So having funding for that is really important.
So I'm just going to jump in.
Yeah.
So in my understanding, you're planting trees and things that are more accustomed to a more southern climate, and you're bringing them up here because you think that our climate is changing, and we're going to need those.
It's changed already,
yeah.
And so we're looking kind of around Missouri, right, and kind of that line, and it's a slow process, but it's something that we're cognizant of, So there's kind of that resiliency factor of, creating more green space, of creating more rain gardens, of, we have a stormwater fee that we implemented it as a board to ensure that when we have heavier rainfall that we're able to handle that. And so then, climate change, number one, what I think it is kind of my overall personal, number one priority, but what has really grown and might soon supplant climate change is just youth investment and youth engagement. Okay. That's something that I didn't have a huge background in when I first ran 4 years ago, but as I've been here, as I've seen what we need as a city to thrive around public safety, around success of our youth, of where we as a park board can play a huge role in the success of our city, it's just youth. Mm-hmm. It is so clear that if we put more dollars into our kids, we reap a dozen different rewards down the road.
Now that you say that, I'm reminded there was an issue. I want to say at Pearl Park or maybe one of the other parks where I didn't even know this was possible. The facility was actually rented out to a daycare center, and there was some disagreement over the lease or something, and
yes.
A lot of people used that center, and I know it's not daycare, but it was some sort of organization that
I think it was Pillsbury. It starts with a P, Pillsbury United, not sure, Pearl or Phillips Aquatic Center, maybe. I know exactly what you're talking about, but there's a million things. So that was something we negotiated, and we kind of resolved that issue. We kind of have a new memorandum of understanding and contract with them, but it is kind of, it's one of those things where we have this public space, and it's kind of this, nonprofit organization that is kind of utilizing our space.
So,
But, yeah.
so what are some of the youth programs that are offered right now? I mean, I know there's that Sparks. We just talked about the daycare.
Yeah.
So that people know like what the money is going towards when you say youth engagement. What are some of the problems?
Well,
projects?
so the big ones that for me that comes to mind, Teen Teamworks. It's a summer employment program. It's also a career pathways program. So typically teens will go in and get job experience, and we've had several dozen park employees who have come up through that process. Rec Plus is our kind of daycare, after school program. That's a big one offered at community centers throughout throughout our system. And it's offered at pretty competitive and affordable rates. Minnesota, I think, is number 3 in cost for childcare in the state. It's really, really expensive here. You also have just our general sports youth rec programming.
Yeah. My kids have played a lot of those.
Yeah, and it's huge and it's important and it's very accessible. And we have a new funding program that's kind of pay what you can, which so far has been effective. We also have.
Can I just put in a little complaint that
Sure.
I feel like there's some of the ball fields at some parks are better maintained than others.
Yeah,
And I think I could be wrong, but I feel like that it is a little bit based on the neighborhood income. Is that?
Yeah. So
am I crazy in thinking that?
That is something that we, as a park, we actually have a racial equity index for investing in neighborhood parks. And in fact, we have basically, in the last decade have, really equitably invested in parks that were typically, because it was kind of based more on, we're hearing more from this community or this one. And we saw that inequitable sort of construction. And so we are almost kind of fully, invested in, Upper South and, North Minneapolis. And we're kind of, it's actually, the places in like Southwest and, wherever in the wealthier, whiter areas that have been neglected for longer. But our ball fields generally have been, kind of neglected. That's something that this board, we voted to have a specific, community engagement plan around that and analysis of our fields. We have that analysis. Now we kind of have to decide how to fund and how to build that out. And it's something that I think we kind of overexpanded our fields. It's kind of an easy, it's pretty cheap to make a bad ball field. And so in a lot of the past park plans, what are we going to put there? We'll just put a baseball field or whatever. And then it goes kind of underutilized. And so we're kind of reforming to have fewer, better fields. That's going to be a bit of a process, but we are cognizant of it.
I mean, and I'm sorry to take off topic. But,
no, totally.
Like when you go out to the suburbs, if your kid you see like this incredible difference. Like they're like semi-pro fields out there, and then you come in and play in the city, and it's just a real difference.
I mean, they're able to draw. I mean, they're within their departments. They're able to kind of draw up funds for those specific things. Certainly more, but I would say we offer more services that lower income folks really rely on, like going back to the Rec Plus, that sort of stuff, going back to Teen Teamworks. Those are sort of really effective programs that those suburban communities don't necessarily need or don't necessarily even fund in the first place. But I do agree our facilities in general though are kind of dilapidated. It's something that me and a couple other Commissioner Men's actually kind of talking about, maybe down the line we consider a city levy for our facilities, just to kind of like bring them up to what we're looking at when we're going to those suburbs, so that they come in here. Our kids don't have to go out to Eden Prairie or Osseo or whatever to play sports. Like, we will have the quality facilities for tournaments, for other things here, and because typically that'd be kind of bonding and other
I
stuff.
mean, it may seem like a small thing, but I could actually see families leaving for the suburbs for stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I
I don't
didn't
think-
mean to
I
take
think-
you off your priorities. So it was
No,
climate
no, totally.
change, youth engagement, and
I would say good governance is
Okay.
kind of the third pole there. And yeah, those are
okay.
my priorities. So.
So, one of the things, you're an incumbent, you've been there 4 years. I'm just wondering, like, what wins do you think that you have in that 4 years, and what are, say, open items that you're looking forward to working on for the next 4 years?
Yeah. So I would say, honestly, personal wins are, things that kind of derive from me are a bit more minimal. Kind of got in there and kind of found that on some of the things I ran really heavily on, I was in the minority on. Wasn't able to, find solid compromises on some of those issues. So for instance, I really wanted to see more of our parkways opened to pedestrians, closed to vehicle traffic, kind of like what we had during COVID. We had a pilot program to test that out and kind of get strong data on that, where we would have closed West River Parkway kind of along the Stone Arch Bridge, for periods of time, so we could develop various materials so that we can kind of do these, pedestrian focused, parkways kind of throughout our system here and there, and kind of dot it out. That's kind of a climate thing. That's kind of an actualization of our park spaces thing. So that's something that I fought for and lost. And that's something that I'm still pushing for. It's not everyone. There's, I think folks who obviously, aren't fans of that, but most voters who I speak with are like, oh yeah, I remember that. I really liked that. The thing is, the park board was dealing with so much during COVID that we don't have strong data of what worked, what didn't. How do we make sure there's still accessibility and safety when we do this? So that's kind of a thing, a win I wish I had, that I'm pushing for again. I think a kind of a personal win, I fought so we have our new marijuana ordinance where it's prohibited like tobacco, but it is not a specific misdemeanor or a fine. That is something that I fought really hard against, creating that fine and kind of recriminalizing marijuana within our parks, cannabis within our parks, because it's something that is just kind of proven to be, how do you enforce that? It's kind of a lower end thing, but if we make it an ordinance, then we're having our officers work on these lower level crimes and then potentially enforcing it unequally. So that was, I think, something that I'm proud of that ordinance. I think it's going to be strong, and that was an effort I led. But then there are a lot of team wins. There's things like Hiawatha Golf Course, the ecological 9-hole plan. That's something.
Tell me about that, because I feel like, I don't know, that's been an issue, and I don't know what happened to it. Like, it's one of those things that surprised me that, and I don't know how many people use the Hiawatha Golf Course, but in South Minneapolis, it's definitely a big deal as to what's happening with it, and all the, we have to pump water off of it, and it's caused controversy with neighbors and stuff. So would you mind just kind of explaining the issues there, and what's the plan with it?
Yeah, so the issues are that, Lake Hiawatha, formerly Bidet Piscine, or Rice Lake, was more of a marshy, kind of swampy area with wild rice, and it was drained and dredged, and, back in the Theodore Wirth days, to create kind of a deeper lake, and a lot of that, dredged soil and land was used to create a berm, and then behind that berm, what are we gonna do? Let's put a golf course. And it's one of those things that, we would probably not even consider doing that today if we had a sort of similar environment. And
it doesn't work without pumping.
And
right?
It doesn't work without pumping. And so we, for decades, had been exceeding our Minnesota Department of Natural Resources permit for pumping water. And so that creates different things like soil compaction. It, it's costly. It creates things like water pollution. And, Lake Hiawatha is one of our most impaired lakes. And so when we're considering what to do as we get to our sort of plan for that area, for Hiawatha, we really had strong community, strong board, strong staff support behind, hey, let's kind of right a historic environmental wrong. We have to still recognize that Hiawatha Golf Course does have historic, significance and important, memories, and it became kind of a fixture for, so certain folks with our community. So, the compromise position is the 9 holes. It really, if we were talking about the optimal environmental position, we wouldn't have golf there at all. It would be restored completely to wetlands, to natural forest, and things of that nature. Instead, we're kind of, we're going to create a really strong, ecologically focused 9-hole course. We have designs now. If your viewers, listeners, folks who are, checking in, we have those designs for comment out right now. I would go out and look at those because at this point in the process, you actually have a really strong outsized impact on what the final look of the course is. But at this point, I think we're looking at, a really cool change and shift here. I think it's going to improve water quality. We're going to see more stronger, more rich natural environment, and we're still going to be able to, hit the links there as well.
Another controversial piece of land is the dog park down at Minnehaha. I hear a lot about that. I mean, obviously I go there, but it was one I had no idea that it was changing until someone handed me a flyer while I was there, and whenever I've talked to people, nobody is happy about the changes. But
no, so this is one that is a little bit out of our hands. It's something I actually kind of voted against the plan because of the very reason what you mentioned. Public was really not informed about it. It was really we're doing this. It's happening. But the background is that land is actually owned by either the National Historical Society or Minnesota Historical Society, and it's one of these things where we had specific land that we turned into a dog park, but the border was never really demarcated. And so, dog owners, where on the river, there's the power line. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the border. So the dog park should end there. But, whenever I go with my dog, you walk all the way kind of to the end and where the creek is. And so that we were kind of, in a way, trespassing on that land, abusing kind of our, privileges there. So,
and who was upset by that?
And so I forget. So the landowners.
It's there's 3.
It's Historic Society there, and I think there's
veterans.
Veterans, and then
maybe one of the indigenous groups.
No, I don't think. Although I think there might be some ideas around the Historic Society. So right further down the river a little bit is something called the Pedote, which is where the confluence of Mississippi and I think Minnesota River, maybe not Minnesota, but where rivers kind of meet together. And so it's an important historic and sacred space. And so I could see there being some sort of national park or sort of reserve set in that sort of vein. So they said basically get these dogs under control, get your dog park under control, or there might be lawsuits involved or kind of more heartburn around that. And so we came up, we're gonna have to put a fence up there. It's one of those things where it's too bad that we didn't do that at the start, because folks really fell in love with this amazing dog park. It's fantastic. Yeah. I'm with folks, absolutely. I wish if there was any way we could not put up the fence, I would absolutely not put up the fence. It's an iconic dog park, and it's so important. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially if you have a dog that's a little reactive, you can kind of find that space to have your own space to engage. So you'll still be able to go to the water. There'll still be beach space. You just won't be able to go to the end, and eventually that fence will be put up. And so we'll see how. We know fences don't always work so well, and borders don't always work so well, but we have to avoid being sued. So, yeah.
So a few more questions for you. You went in, getting back to kind of youth engagement, and I'm getting this from the vote 411, some of your answers there.
Sure.
You mentioned that activating youth parks at all park hours at all times of the year, that you want to have enough resources to do that.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly does that mean? Are you looking to like extend the hours that the parks are open?
Well, so we actually had to cut recreation hours, recreation center hours, due to various financial constraints. And so we cut those. We also had to cut various ice rinks across the system.
And that's a big one.
That's a big one, and we heard constituents, and and actually I have good news. In our new budget, where no rinks are going to be closed, and we're kind of editing how some of them are managed to hopefully reduce costs. Again, this is a climate change thing, though.
Yeah.
Eventually, we will have. We'll still probably get below freezing every once in a while, maybe even the majority of the time. But what we're seeing is like, okay, it's cold for a little bit and then it's warm for a week. And that's just really unsustainable. And so we might be able to look into some things like refrigeration and other stuff like that. But yeah, it's increasing funds. It's getting back to, our full rec hours. It's, recreation is maybe the second largest portion of our budget. The largest is environmental stewardship and maintenance. That's about 50% of our budget is just kind of maintaining what we have and maintaining the natural environment within it. And so I want to see our youth budget, increasing so we are able to identify barriers, because there are folks, there are communities, if you go to, Cedar Riverside, Somali community, and you ask like, oh, so what park programming do you like to engage in? A lot of folks aren't going to even know that is there. There's just kind of a barrier of knowledge. And so, we can have better communication staff. We can have, we're actually, working with Pillsbury United to update our recreation center within Cedar Riverside. And so that's something where, hey, let's have a staffer who works there, who goes out into the community and literally solicits folks to come in and utilize our programming. And so that's kind of, dream, that's, extra money, that's kind of down the line. But there are barriers to access for our park system, even though kind of in our minds, like we know, we can just, Google Park Board, sign up, and there's a pay as you go, and it's overall pretty accessible, but there's kind of that last stretch that we need to make.
And one of the things that you mentioned was, I think, just about transit and being able to get to the parks. I'm kind of ignorant here. Buses are allowed on parkways, right?
Largely no.
No, okay.
Largely no. So largely our parkways are actually not at the grade that are able to handle bus traffic. So in a lot of spaces, they would completely degrade what we have. And that was also kind of an intentional thing, because our parkways were kind of seen as exclusively recreational. I think I would still say largely they are recreational, and that's kind of why I'm for kind of opening them to pedestrians and doing different things with them. But there are specific areas and routes and where population density has risen, where I think it's important that we improve our transit connections. We did, south of Bede-Makaska, we have a BRT stop that we allowed there. We will have a stop for the Blue Line extension that will be close to Olsen Memorial Parkway, or Victory Memorial Parkway, that is. And although there's some controversy around that, I wanted an at-grade stop because it would have been cheaper for taxpayers. But overall, there are not really strong connections to our parks. And when you talk about accessibility, there's nothing more accessible for folks with disabilities, for our seniors, than transit. It is completely ADA accessible. 60% of folks with disabilities aren't able to drive. And so that, I think, is kind of creating those connections. We can even talk about, micro transit, we have kind of the micro shuttles that Metro Transit is doing. So getting the funds to improve our roads, working with Metro Transit to identify, where within their routes we can have those connections, would be important to develop.
Okay. I guess I just didn't. I get confused because only the people who I feel like who really know the difference between like a county road, a park road, and a city road are the people in operations, right? It's not like
it's a total cluster. I will say just about every parkway is that kind of red asphalt. So if you're driving on red asphalt, that's probably a parkway.
I did see, what was it, a couple years ago, the city gave like $2 million to the parks to help them like fill in potholes or something.
Yeah, and so that's another funding source issue. We don't get that from, your property taxes. Well, I mean, yes, ultimately property taxes, but that's not something we're able to raise and levy. That is the maintenance of our parkways is up to the city of Minneapolis. And so
I assumed it was the park. Okay.
Yeah, so we have to go to them and we have to cry and beg basically for, hey, our parkways are in terrible condition. We need that funding. And so this park board made it a priority to make that request, to build that political pressure. And I think we have something like an extra $3 million-ish, or between 1.7 and 3 million per year of funding for parkways. That's honestly not a lot, but it's some. We need significantly more over a significant period of time. We have something like 55 miles of parkways. This again is kind of why I'm interested in finding other uses for them to help reduce that maintenance strain. And because we don't have the funds to completely maintain it. We know they're in bad condition. We know that we need to do better, and we're trying, but we don't have the full autonomy to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little mystified when I look at budgets as to why it costs so much to maintain the roads. They seem, and I know that's not a question you can answer, really. I mean, it just seems like the contracts are very expensive.
Well, they are, but car infrastructure is just expensive. It's really expensive. It's put on to, that's why transit's so important. That's why getting folks to walk and bike and other stuff is so important. We live in a state where we have a lot of thawing and freezing, and that causes a lot of issues. And as cars get heavier, so electric vehicles are very heavy. They're, up to 5 times more heavy than gas vehicles of a similar size. And that causes exponential road damage.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again? What cars are 5 times heavier?
Electric vehicles.
Oh,
so if you if you have an electric Hummer and a gas Hummer, obviously electric in a lot of ways is going to be better for the environment. But as far as for road maintenance, it's going to be far, far harder on the environment.
Okay.
So I think that's something that isn't really being talked about in the public. But I think as we transition to that, we're going to see these maintenance costs balloon. You can Google it, you can look it up. There's formulas for how much more degradation there is for heavier vehicles, and it is not linear. It is.
I think there's a lot of costs associated with electric vehicles that get overlooked. I mean, even just the mining and for the batteries and all that stuff. There's a lot.
Yeah, to be clear, I prefer electric vehicles over gas vehicles because I think we have to reduce our greenhouse gases as much as possible. But the primary goal needs to be getting folks out of cars, period.
So kind of in that vein, one of the controversial, if you will, decisions the park board made was around the mall.
Yeah, uptown the mall. Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, I think you were in the minority on that one, and wanting to... Well, first of all, maybe you could just explain a little bit about what that was all about. Yeah. And then talk about like how in the park board it gets weighed. Like, I think the difference was you felt like the added green space would help improve water quality, and it was part of maybe the long-term plan, versus other people in the neighborhood wanted it because they live in the brownstones and they need the parking. Mm-hmm. And then there was something with the fire department, felt like they needed emergency vehicle access. So how do you go about weighing the various needs and even what the issue was? Because I'm sure unless people live around there, they have no idea what it is. Yeah,
so the Uptown Mall Park, so if you go to the transit station in Hennepin and you go towards Lake of the Isles, it's that sort of promenade of mostly parking, and then kind of in the center there's a pathway and some green space there.
There's a bike lane there. right? Like
There's the green way is just north of it. Yep.
Okay.
So basically, so in the long range plan, so our long range plan is something that is planned over few years. It involves our equity metrics of who in the community do we solicit to be part of our CACs, which are our planning groups, which are made up of.
What is that? Please tell me.
Oh gosh, it's communities. I should know.
Okay.
It's community something committee. It's
some kind of community feedback.
Yeah.
Committee. Okay.
Yep. So it involves folks that live in the area. It involves renters. It involves homeowners. It involves we make sure to have people of color. We make sure to have even folks who are kind of outside of the park and or the exact premises, because our parks aren't really your backyard, right? Even if you live next to one, they are for the community at large and within the overall watershed. So that group went over the mall with a fine-tooth comb of what we should do there, and it is within our park board goals is to increase green space, and is to fight climate change, and is to create spaces that are more based around people rather than storage of vehicles. And so that group made up of an equitable mixture of folks voted with a majority to create a plan wherein 2 blocks of parking on the north side of the mall and of the road in general are converted from asphalt to community green space that could be used for things like community gardens, could use for recreation, could use for just planting trees, rain gardens, you name it. Now, folks within that CAC, there were dissenting voices who wanted to keep that parking. Now those voices, so kind of cut to a few years later, the Met Council is doing sewage work underneath the mall. And they're going to tear it up because they have to do their work. When they rebuild it, because we have this long range plan, typically they would rebuild according to that plan. Them doing that would save the park board around $350,000. Basically, we'd have a free park. They would implement our plan for free. So that comes to the board for board approval, because it's kind of advancing the plan a little bit. The dissenting voices who kind of lost that initial CAC process kind of resurface. They, influence and pressure commissioners, and they kind of come in. They know the process because they're well connected, and they make this case. It starts off initially as just save parking, and the biggest voices are actually folks who are living north of the mall, because if folks aren't able to park there's a ton of free parking north of the mall, and that's kind of largely where people would be moved towards. And this is all to say, kind of an underlying factor here, it's actually against park ordinance to park after 10 p.m. there. You're not allowed to do overnight parking on parkways, on park roads and property. So this is kind of all going on. It's not actually something that should be allowed, but it's something that's kind of tolerated because it is kind of understood that it is a service to folks. So while we have it, might as well let folks do that. So it starts off as this kind of completely, it's keep our parking, don't do the green space, and throw away $350,000. Eventually, kind of after that, argumentation doesn't necessarily gain as much traction as is needed to overturn a long-range plan, which is quite a heavy task, because we are basically saying to that community engagement process, or that equity-driven process, no, actually, we're going to ignore that there. So that then brings in the safety concerns, the fire concerns. Oh, well, if there's not this road here, there isn't going to be, fire trucks aren't going to be able to access the buildings on those brownstones. When in fact, it's on the north side, there's no buildings that are immediately abut the green space we would change. There would still be roadway, and it would actually be, we would have been putting in new fire hydrants. We would have been making it safer, and fire trucks are built to be able to go over curbs and things, and so there would have been on the west end, ways for a fire truck. If for some reason it was coming from the west end, it would never really be coming from the west end. It would be coming, typically up Lagoon, and then would just hang a right in front of any of the buildings. And so, there's a, Charles Rucker is a firefighter. He, yeah. So we have, so there was kind of a firefighter connection, and the fire chief was kind of brought in as this kind of political, I believe, as like we don't have the parking argument, it's not going to win, so let's kind of leverage this safety argument. And meanwhile, the kind of East Isles Neighborhood Association, these folks who have been advocating for the parking, kind of gather this momentum and gather, community, kind of frame it as just like, Park Board's going to take away your parking. Even though we did a parking study, there's still going to be plenty of parking. There's plenty of parking north. And ultimately, the board voted to go against the plan, voted to tell Met Council, actually don't build back according to our long-range plan. And we went against community engagement. We went against green space. We went against climate action. We, I don't think we can necessarily, at least this iteration of the board, go to folks and say, hey, participate in our planning process. Once, we have a strong, equitable plan and look at these goals, make sure to base your plan based off of climate action and increasing green space. And, we'll listen to that, and that'll matter. And so I found it as kind of very disingenuous. I found it as, kind of manipulating safety concerns to get your way on something. And I thought it just kind of completely went against our park board principles of what, like, we are in a climate crisis. Like, when we have an opportunity to create a space that is more environmentally friendly, that reduces urban heat island effect, that is, 50 feet away from Lake of the Isles, one of our, most important water bodies, and we decide to say, no, actually, we want, 20 parking spots instead. Just for me, it was very galling. And yeah, that was a vote I unfortunately lost. And I really hope we get a board that recognizes that it's important that when we say act boldly on climate change, when folks say, no, I want you to maintain the status quo, because there's always going to be someone who says, I want you to maintain the status quo. You have to stand by your principles and your overall goal first.
What were the, and part of the answer I read is that it was also somehow related, the work they're doing is related to storm runoff, and this has water quality issues. Is stormwater going directly into those two lakes? Is that part of the issue?
Just all, basically, the vast majority of stormwater goes untreated directly into our lakes. Yeah. And that's just something overall that we're working on and that we have to conquer as a city. And so when you have any, extra salt that you're adding, any roadways around there, any extra, stuff that's not going through the ground and into the aquifer, and it's bad. And I'm not going to say all of a sudden if we do this one thing, Lake of the Isles is going to be pristine and pure, but it's part of a larger picture.
Do they use salt on the roads around the lakes, or
yeah? I think we try to limit it, but I don't. It's very hard to use no salt. And again, that's something like we have a road on Lake Harriet on the east end, so that we're on that beach there. It kind of splits. The parkway splits, right? There's one that kind of goes up a hill, and then there's one that goes along. Kind of around like 42nd-ish or something like that. That lower end is completely vestigial, and so we don't need to be salting that, and that's right next to Lake Harriet. We don't need to be having cars and oil, and the biggest microplastic contributor to our water is rubber tires, right? And it's actually in the park plan that we're supposed to have that closed off, but we're not moving on it. So there's all these little things where, here and there, like, okay, well, I recognize the status quo is important, but we can also be ambitious here. And, maybe it's an inconvenience for folks here or there, but, the strive of humanity to, live a life with zero inconvenience has kind of led us down this rabbit hole in the first place. So,
Well, I have two last questions for you, if that's all right. One is about this was a big one this summer in particular, and these are related. You mentioned lighting and infrastructure in terms of improving safety, and I know it was like we had one big shooting in Boone Park, and I think several parking lots ended up getting closed. One at Bidet Mataska, and I don't remember where the other one was, but they had to introduce these new restrictions, I think, just because big parties were showing up, and then violence was coming out of those. So what's your solution there? I mean, is lighting take care of it? Are we going to continue to see more restrictions on parking lots? What?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the restrictions on when people can be in our parking lots is like kind of our last like bastion of control. It's one of the few levers that we have to pull there. Lighting is very, very important. Copper wire theft has had a huge negative effect on and impact on us. The new state law making it a little harder to sell is helping a little, but not a ton. And getting those lights back up is important. Something I want to do in this next term, if reelected, is I really want to have kind of a overarching lighting analysis of where we need it, how we fund it, and start to work with our intergovernmental partners to make that happen, because I think it is critical. It's much harder to be nefarious when you are underneath incredibly bright lights and people can see and identify you exactly. So that is absolutely step one. There are other
Does the park have cameras on all the...
No, we have some cameras.
Not that I'm advocating that, it's like...
Because then you need people to watch the cameras.
Well, and for me, it's like, we're moving more and more to this like constant surveillance state,
Absolutely.
just to, for protection and safety, which everyone wants protection and safety. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
Cameras,
so, more lighting.
Yeah, so cameras, I don't really. Again, I think the price for what you get out of it is not. It can help you kind of solve, make arrests after the fact, but it doesn't necessarily prevent anything. So there are other force multipliers. There are things like, having, that infrastructure, like, with, closing parkways. If we, kind of what I wanted in that initial pilot, we would have been able to have infrastructure where we can kind of easily, all right, you can come in this way or whatever, but you can't, leave this way. So it makes it harder that if, something goes down, a lot of this is, it's kids driving, here's where the party is going to be. Everyone goes there and we meet, and then, something pops off, and then you get in the car and boom, you're gone. So having, harder infrastructure, giving those resources to our police department around lighting, around, more tools, again, the term like force multipliers, because we only have 36 officers.
What does that mean, hard infrastructure?
So like gates, of being able to close something, of being able to, make it so that it is harder to get in and out of the space.
What came to my mind is like a rental car place where you like drive in, you can't drive out,
That sort of stuff. And then, there are other things, activating those spaces better. One thing I really want to do is I really want to see more, not necessarily food trucks, but like food carts and spaces where maybe there's like, park staff or like, so you have that lighting, you have that sort of presence of someone just being there. And that creates an environment already where you're drawing maybe more families, you're maybe making it less of a place where like, we can just kind of go here and kind of sneakily have fun and do whatever. Like we've also had it at Stone Arch Bridge and other things. So giving our officers those tools to, do their job better, because we have about like 36 officers. Certainly our chief would tell you that we're understaffed and that we need more officers. That's probably true, but I don't think we're going to win any sort of hiring wars. With, certainly Minneapolis is trying to scoop up and grab as many officers as possible. Other cities are trying, there's absolutely a shortage. And the cost of that is just like, it gets exponential, right? So I think there are ways that we can optimize the force that we have. And that's what I want to see. I think lighting is maybe step number one, but there are other problem areas where, I think we can kind of focus on things like the hard infrastructure of activation of space, of working with community to say, hey, we're starting to notice that this is a gathering spot. We don't necessarily want to kind of bring down the hammer and cut off the access to everyone in the public, because we know most folks are law-abiding. But how do we kind of start to be really responsive and receptive in creative ways there?
Yeah, I mean, I know I saw the price tag on like some of the changes they're making around the U.S. Bank Stadium, and I was like, oh my God, that's expensive. They're just the way they're preparing it for hard infrastructure changes so that things can't happen.
Well, so. and I should mention, I mean, I am more or less a gun abolitionist. Like, I truly believe that they are the root cause of this. That you don't have things like mass. There are some mass stabbings, but like that's not gonna stray. And the child who was murdered in I think Fulton in North Minneapolis, that was just stray bullets. So that is something that me as a politician, I am advocating absolutely for gun reform, for assault weapons bans, but I also think that. It says militia there. I don't think you should be able to necessarily have a gun on your person. And so I think, we need as a country to move forward on that. Things that the park board could do, Moms Demand Action has reached out to coordinate with us to have things like...
What's it called? I'm sorry.
Moms Demand Action.
Demand.
Action.
Okay,
Demand Action. Sorry. And so they, potentially offering things like trigger locks at our recreation centers or things like that. Not necessarily that these youth are going to walk in and do that, but like promoting gun violence reduction where we can. I mean, that's obviously the core, like this safety stuff, this other like the infrastructure. Those are sort of the hidden costs that we pay for our very loose views on what folks can do with the Second Amendment.
Right. Well, I just wanted to switch from policy stuff and maybe just talk about the mechanics of this election.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this race in particular is a strange one, I think, right? It's at large, so it's the whole city, and there's 8 people running. Yeah. But there's 3 positions. So when I go to vote, how am I supposed to rank people for those 3 positions? How do you get elected? Give me a rundown.
So you should just rank who you like in the order that you like. As a voter walking into that booth, there should be no greater strategy in your mind of like, oh, well, I think this person might get more, so I'm going to go second. Or like, I think if I don't play those games, it's not gonna, there's really no way, there's no way to kind of manipulate or game the system in that way. So if you're listening, top line, vote for who you like. That's kind of all you need to think of. That said, certainly as campaigns and as overarching strategies, there is sort of, various kind of school of thought of, okay, if you have a coalition of folks who are really coordinating, do you maybe, who you think maybe has a weaker campaign, do you kind of put them, ask folks to rank them first, and so maybe they don't get, knocked out on a certain round, or do you maybe have, an effect where you try to load up votes, so what the way that at large is kind of weird is that I need 25% plus 1 to be able to be elected. So
it's different than the regular election where you need 50.
Yep, it's different than that. So if you have 25% plus 1, that means that you have enough to win, and any votes that you have that are superfluous of that, they get redistributed proportionally to how much over the threshold you are. So if I get, say you need 50 votes to win, and I get 100, that the proportion, I don't know the exact proportion. I don't know if it's 50% or what have you, then gets reallocated to my second choice votes. So there is some kind of
So you could actually
calculation
win
there.
by too much, is what you're saying. So like if you
No, I wouldn't say too much. I mean, you
Like,
can win, but you can go over.
if
but
you got 40% of first place votes for this,
yeah,
do some of those get reallocated to other people?
yes, they do. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So there isn't such a thing as Tom Olsen is going to absolutely win. So I'm not going to vote for him because I know he's going to win, and I don't want to, my vote to go to waste or whatever. Nope, your vote will get reapportioned. So just vote for who you like, and it'll go down in that way. So yeah, there's some weird mechanics around that. And, other places they'll have different at-large seats that you vote for. We're kind of all thrown in, and then kind of, with that reapportionment, it's in a way it's to get at these consensus candidates. Who are the people who are on the most ballots? Not necessarily who are the people that get the most first, or who, whatever. Like, who are, when voters look, they, the vast majority are saying, oh yeah, I think I like that person. So top line, vote for who you like. There are some intricacies, and I could talk to you for hours on end about what are some theories around what are the best ways for coalitions to work for this.
Well,
But there's not really, it's hard because we're such a unique system that there's not a lot of data on this, and there's not a lot of strong conventional thought that you can say that's the way to do it.
So you were nominated by the DFL, or you have not nominated, but you have their endorsement.
Mm-hmm.
You and Michael Wilson and Amber Frederick. So are you running as a team, or do you have like a second choice for people, or how do you? When people ask you when you're out door knocking, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so we are running as a slate.
Okay.
So we're running as DFL endorsed. We're also, backed by, the vast majority of the large labor groups, LIUNA, MLRF, MFA, SCIU, you name it. So I am running. So I am going up. I'm saying to support the other DFL folks. I've been a DFLer my whole life, and I do respect and value that endorsement. If 3 other folks were endorsed, as DFL at large, I actually would have dropped out. It would be very hard for me to maintain credibility, I think, at the Capitol if I weren't. So that's who I'm running for. Running with, those are the other 2 who I will be ranking. That said, there are fantastic folks across the board who are running. My colleague, Meg Forney, really, I kind of didn't expect that we would get along on as many of the issues as we have. And she, really has strong institutional knowledge, and at the end of the day, just loves our park system. Mm-hmm. And that's really, if you're running for the park board, it's pretty thankless. You don't get paid a lot. It's hard hours. It's complex. I feel like after, 3.5 years, I feel like I'm just now.
Well, to me, after this conversation, I thank you for coming in. It's much more complex than I've ever really considered.
It's very, very hard. And so Meg's, I really appreciate her, and she's fantastic. I'd be happy to serve next to her again. You have someone like Adam Schneider, who's Green Party, climate-oriented, community-oriented, working in community gardens and things like that. Great guy. Mary McKelvey also kind of, digs into the details, and, she, seems like someone who genuinely is, in love with our park system. And then I don't know so much about the other 2, Avery Turner and Matthew Doug Willow, but, really, it seems like they're all good folks. I don't like to say that I'm running against X or X. I really like to think we're kind of running alongside each other. We're going to have to be working with each other,
And
so
who are the incumbents? Like yourself, Meg Forney, and any of these other? I'm sorry, I should know this.
So the incumbents are Meg and I, and actually Charles Rucker, who is transferring from at-large to running for his District 2 in North, which was vacated by Becca Thompson, to run in Ward 12. So only 2 incumbents at this point for at-large.
Okay. Great. Well, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we've missed that you want to talk about? And also, if you could just tell people how they can find out more about you.
So to find out more about me, my website is olsenforparks.org, OLSEN for parks.org. My contact information's on there, so you can reach out to me. I'm always happy. I try to be very receptive. But life gets chaotic, and sometimes I miss things, so I'm sorry if I do. And other things to know at this point, if you've listened to this whole podcast, you know more. Know more than probably 92%, if not more, of Minneapolis voters. I would say just reach out to your commissioners. Occasionally when you have issues, look at Park Board. Watch. Pay attention to Park Board news. Pay attention to this stuff because it really is super important. Minneapolis would not be the city we are without our parks.
Yeah,
it's hands down our identity of who we are as a city. It's what makes us what I think a global leader in certain sense, and why people should come here and live here. And it's why our quality of life is so fantastic. So just pay attention.
Yeah, I appreciate the passion around it. When I've talked to Meg Forney, same thing, just so passionate about our parks. So,
yeah.
I think that is something that's unique about Minneapolis, how just passionate people are about them. And like you said earlier, people don't just from the city use them, they come from all over. So it's great.
Absolutely. I've traveled all over the world. I don't think anywhere does it better.
Great.
And I mean that. So.
All right. Thank you.
Cool.